Essentially, this horrible nuclear leak, by the way, not an explosion, this isn't Chernobyl or anything, this horrible nuclear leak has created a new type of people, a type of people that has a capability which is both very dangerous to themselves and very dangerous to society and to the people who surround them. We're going to explain how this ability essentially establishes a form of dehumanizing torture to the society who surrounds them and eventually onto themselves. Before we move into the actual arguing part, we think, especially in a sci-fi motion like this, it's really important to set a few like fair ground presumptions about what happens in the motion so that we can all have a nice, clean debate. So we're going to assume that at least for the vast majority of them, the government has already surveyed the area and knows who they are. We're going to assume that the treatment is about 100% effective, and if it isn't, we're going to retest and do it again until it's effective. How we're going to do it is just quarantine the area for however many days it takes, right? It's going to be days or a few weeks tops, and until we get all the people vaccinated or treated for this capability, and then we let everybody go. As to what's actually happened, let's assume that the leak happened next to a town or a city of about 1 million people. 0.5% of them got disability, so we're talking about 5,000 people who have disability. We think that's like a nice, clean, fair amount. And what does the ability function like? So we basically sort of hear other people's top level thoughts, so their internal monologue and their like upper processes, upper cognitive processes. If they're very close, you hear them like you would hear someone talking to you close. If they're further away, you hear them less strongly. If they're very far away, then you just don't hear them at all. It can be directed. You can like focus on something, focus your beam of mind reading on something, and you obviously cannot turn it off. There's no reason to think that any of this would ever change, by the way. We're also assuming that while the majority of people, we're going to explain why, are likely to say yes and voluntarily get this treatment anyway, at least it's fair to assume that a significant minority will say no, otherwise there is no debate. So moving on, we're going to claim 4 things. We're going to claim 1, why there's an inherent unpreventable damage onto others. Secondly, why there's an inherent damage onto themselves, which requires this paternalistic intervention of government. Thirdly, we're going to talk about risks of abuse. And fourthly, we're going to compare it to the harm upon their autonomy, which inevitably is caused when you force someone into a medical treatment, as we do in many cases in status quo. So first, let's talk about this inherent unpreventable damage onto others. So A, why is privacy even an important thing? And why is harming it such a harm? So we say developing ourselves, having a sense of self, our emotional autonomy is something that happens within our thoughts. Our thoughts are our most are the only thing that we can actually reliably keep private from the world. And they are thus where our self is located and also where our self develops, where our self has conversations with ourselves, where our self examines ideas and where we pursue thoughts, developments, etc., etc. That means that a few things happen when you heard it. So one, trivially, there are some secrets, personal secrets, commercial secrets that one can be greatly harmed by having exposed, and one wants to hide very greatly. Secondly, we say thoughts are sort of silly. Thoughts cannot be controlled. They cannot be directed. The attempt to control them is actually futile. Like if you ever tried to not think of an elephant, right? The attempt to control them is futile, and thus they're uncontrollable. But also, secondly, and more importantly, they're not all meaningful. They all seem to be meaningful, but they're not all meaningful. Everybody who's ever sat in the exit row of the plane, I believe, has had the thought of, what if I open this now? What will happen? How would I open this? All of the thoughts like this, like romantic thoughts in inappropriate situations, destructive thoughts in inappropriate situations, just something we have by virtue of being human. Thirdly, we say it's exposure. It's the penetration of your deepest autonomy. It's like showering with walls that are transparent. Our most private things, our most private selves are laid bare unto the world to see. And it's sort of a panopticon, right? Even if nobody's watching, we are now in the shower with these exposed emotional walls. And lastly, we say it can also hurt others, because I could be thinking of others' secrets. I could be thinking thoughts about others, which then means harms onto them. This particularly happens because thoughts are most personal, because thoughts are uncontrollable, because thoughts happen all the time, and because thoughts give a complete and total exposure of ourselves. In fact, what it is dehumanizing. It's the most severe harm onto the autonomy of someone. Because what is autonomy if not the capability to set the bound between the self and the world and say, I own myself, I own my being, I own my thought, I own my ideas, and therefore I can separate them from the world. And it's a much graver harm onto autonomy than harm onto bodily autonomy is. Yes, Miloš.
So humans are pretty much much more simpler than we actually thought. So people like psychologists and interrogators usually have kind of a grasp and ability to do this even without this gift, just not with 100% certainty. Would you, in your perfect world, also ban these things, like ban psychological research and stuff like that?
So a few answers. A, I dispute the premise. Like, I just don't think that's true, that anyone can get nearly close to mind reading. If you can, you will be a very rich man, and I'm glad to be a friend. But I just think we're factually super far away from this. Secondly, the entry into most of these situations is consensual. In cases where consent is problematic, like the Facebook consent form, we would challenge that consent and we would ask these good questions about it. And so what we have is a lot more similar to a disease. Sorry for the topical analogy, right? But something that hurts other people even if you don't intend. And therefore, we're justified in intervening against you even if there's no intent. Secondly, the damage onto yourself and the damage onto yourself. Okay, those are like yourself, one word, yourself, two words. How does that happen? We say there's no reason to believe that the core inherent mechanisms that shape both sensory input and memory change. A key idea with memory is that it's A, easily manipulatable, and B, it's prone to misattribution. We say crucially that means when you hear other people's thoughts all the day, you have a disengagement of your sense of self. You have misattributions constantly happening. You have things that you misconstrue to be your own thoughts. Just imagine, as a form of torture that is often done by those people who torture, like like Guantanamo, having radio that you can control bombarded at you all day. That leads to a loss of self, that leads to misattribution. That leads to two core harms. One is suggestibility, which enables other people to abuse you having that ability. And secondly, we say just a loss of yourself, which means that we have to choose for you what you can't choose for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you for your fine speech. In order to continue the round, I invite the leader of opposition. Here.
Do people hear me?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Everything is great.
Just a second then, let me just open my stopwatch.
You are currently frozen, if you're not aware.
I'm frozen?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if that happens if I minimize Zoom, but I might have to do that to have a stopwatch.
Okay.
Okay. Starting.
You're completely frozen, I think, if you go out of Zoom.
Yeah, I think that's gonna have to happen because there's no other way for me to use a stopwatch.
Is there any way for no, that's fine. Okay.
So starting now. We're going to claim two things on opening opposition. We're going to talk about how this is a gross violation of autonomy by the state. We're also going to dispute the clash in utility. But before that, let's clarify our stance here and give a few responses to opening government. First of all, in terms of everything Noam says about the loss of individual agency, we say this can essentially be negated by the fact that we have fiat to say that if people want willingly to undergo this procedure, we can allow them to do that and erase all the harms that they perceive to their body and to their autonomy. Secondly, let's also be very clear on the fact that we can still punish people for the consequences of their actions. If, for example, they harm somebody or they commit fraud or certain things, we do that today in the status quo. We do not punish you for the possession of an ability, rather for the consequence of its usage. Note, intuition pump. Me being able to accumulate wealth also enables me to buy a gun and kill a lot of people, which is not just a violation of their privacy, but also of their right to life because they're like dead. We still do not ban me from having money simply because the consequence of my actions can be dire. But note that most of government case is essentially an intuition pump. A lot of things accord us huge advantages over others. Being more intelligent by nature, being more physically strong, having rhetorical talent to manipulate people, having the psychological knowledge and methods to get insight into people's minds and read them, as Miloš said in his POI. So the question to the government side is essentially, where would they draw the line Because note that the usage of most abilities in a zero-sum game context harms someone else without their consent. My inborn intelligence, which enables me to get a job more than it does another person, harms their autonomy to fulfill their idea of happiness because they lose the resources to do that, and I presumably did not consent to them doing that and would rather that they did not. The only thing government case relies on is you believing that this is so horrible because it's a new thing we've never heard of, but the logic is generally the same. But also, we want to say that the harm that they posit is not insignificant. Plausibly, you have to be in a room with these people for them to be able to read your mind, or unless you're able to read the mind of 8 billion people at one point, at which point there's also no debate, as Noam mentions. So like, you can avoid them. There's probably very few of them, as they define in their case. The chances that you're going to find yourself in the same place with these people and that they're going to use like this information against you is very low. So the practical harms are also very low, and this comes down to the principle. And what I said until now boils very nicely into our principle. So let's talk about the principle of autonomy. An advantage over other people does not constitute a reason for state intervention against the human body. Why? Because the logic of the government in this case means that if it were technically possible, they would have to aim to lower all advantages which can be used to gain an upper hand against people in a zero-sum game. Things such as intelligence, for example, as I've mentioned before. Because all use of abilities relates to the autonomy of someone else to the extent that I achieve a larger extent of success, a larger extent of wealth, a larger extent of social respect, very often means that someone else cannot access these privileges, which therefore also impacts their access to autonomy and to their pursuit of their definition of who they want to be as a person and where they want to find themselves in life, because this impacts the amount of resources that they have here. This therefore means that they would have to support state intervention in faculties which are directly necessary to pursue your definition of happiness. State intervention and state action only makes sense insofar as it enables people to have a sphere of protection around them, which then enables them to pursue their definition of happiness. And what is happiness? Happiness essentially means you have certain goals you strive towards, a certain picture, a visualization of what you want to achieve in life and what kind of person you want to be, and that you are then able to strive towards the definition. Happiness essentially is goal achievement. At the point where the state takes away, and government has to stand for this, your faculties which are necessary for you to achieve this, the state is becoming an impediment for you to achieve your happiness. Why it is important? Because the government has no epistemic access to moral superiority. They cannot claim that the autonomy we take away from other people if their privacy is violated is in any way morally superior or inferior to the autonomy we take from these people to enhance their abilities to achieve happiness in this motion. This is something that everyone needs to have in mind later. A couple of other things I want to point out. First of all, we're very fine with punishing the consequences of the usage of your abilities, and this is the same thing that we do with other abilities. I've said this already, but it's important to reiterate. Secondly, we have two more things we want to notify everyone watching this debate about. One, harm, and even the possibility of a third-party harm, does not constitute a reason for banning scope of action. Know that most of decisions that we take in life can have horrible third-party harms which people did not consent to. If I decide not to take a better job and not to accept a pay raise, this may harm my family and my family budget. If I decide not to get a good education, like I'm studying political science and I'm going to be unemployed, my future family may suffer because of this. There are consequences which we are very unaware of and consequences which might be dire. But the reason why we still do not intervene in these kind of situations is because we tend to prioritize, if we want to talk about moral superiority and ranking here, we tend to prioritize the right of people to use their autonomy to achieve what we think is the ultimate goal, and that is some kind of self-actualization. But secondly, utility also does not constitute a reason for intervention, because probably given this is like some new kind of ability, it probably like changes your biological structure, genetic structure, stuff like this, it would maybe be a utilitarian thing to do, to experiment on these people, right? To conduct experiments on them to see what happens to them. But probably government will not stand for this, right? Because we cannot measure utility between equal moral actors. If I kill everyone watching this debate and take their organs, I would save more people than the amount of people I killed. But because the person I save has an equal right to life as the person I killed, we cannot do this. The same applies for the right to self-actualization that is inherent in this debate. Before I move on to contesting the clash in utility, I'll take a POI from Monica and Noam.
So if I peek into your shower using a device that lets me watch you through walls, that is the crime. The crime isn't me then doing something with those images. Why is peeking into your thoughts any different?
Because there is a part of this action which has premeditation. Premeditation, therefore, means that there was an intent to act in a negative way. The premeditation and expectation of future harm is the reason why we punish, not the act itself. But finally, on utility, to every extent to which government claims utility is decreased, we can increase it. Know that this changes the criminal justice system. Know that now if somebody is doubting me and I cannot remove this doubt, but I'm actually innocent, I can willingly put myself under the process of having my mind read and literally have proof that I did not do something that people accuse me of. This is probably also going to impact disproportionately those who are already like targets of institutional racism and stuff like this. Secondly, this increases accountability. Like people in positions of power that literally control our entire lives through policies and coercive mechanisms, like people in the highest echelons of political halls and parliaments, can now be held accountable to the extent to which we know how they intend to use their power over our lives. And this is essentially how we reclaim autonomy, right? Because we can hold the institutions which shape the framework and the norms of our lives to account and be able to use the mechanisms at our disposal to change them if they misuse these mechanisms and decide to create of our lives something we do not want our lives to be. So best case scenario, we accept government's metric of utility, but we have an equal amount of it. For those reasons, opening opposition wins this debate.
Thank you very much for your speech. In order to continue the game on the government side, I invite the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Okay, so can everyone hear me?
Yeah, everything's good.
Okay, cool. Okay. I'm good to go. So notice that opposition mostly tries to bombard you with analogies saying that other things are really okay, but never do they actually show why this particular choice is such a thing that we should allow, why this accident that has happened to several people is something that we must defend so much as a state. But moreover, notice that they don't engage with our particular case, explaining that this is not a form of ability. This is not me being smart. This is not me being beautiful or whatever. This is a form of weapon that people have possessed in an unnatural way that we say that the mere existence of is something that we want to ban. Now, notice that we don't even agree with their analogy of the Second Amendment, since we think that only one crazy country actually adopted the fact that we can have a weapon that can harm so many people. We would take the stance that this is something that we want to avoid as much, and we want to take this ability away from people for their use. Now here, notice that they try to tell us, this is not such a huge damage to people for two reasons. The first one is they say, well, if somebody does a crime based on this, we can punish him. But notice that this is unreliable. What kind of court can actually rule, you stole his patent using your mind reading abilities? Who would know? Who would have an access to your mind and to what you thought and to what they thought? This is something that society cannot be protected from using the conventional means that we have. And we cannot say that we invented this new technology of reading the minds of people, because this goes against the motion, because it's a unique ability that only those individuals have. So they cannot say that we have a means of actually dealing with this. But then the second caveat that they give is that they try to say, well, so people can simply avoid living with that person. Notice that this is factually wrong, because this would require us to know who these people are. So it seems like, according to their logic, we should actually mark and maybe have a list of, you are a potential offender and people should avoid you. But also, it's unrealistic. People cannot really change their house, change their schools, avoid the supermarket screening when they see someone who might possibly read their minds. We don't think it's realistic, but moreover, according to their logic, it's like having a pedophile in your neighborhood and then saying, we shouldn't punish him. People should simply move their houses if they don't want their kids to be in harm's way. We think that this is ridiculous. But then let's actually compare what we get on our side and what we get on their side. So notice that their main issue is, I have autonomy. I have a right to make myself happy. Wrong. Already in today's society, I might be very happy with beating up someone, and yet my choice is limited at the point where I harm somebody by doing that. I might be very happy with inciting against someone, and yet my choice is not respected. So not any life choice is something that we're willing to accept, especially as what we have shown here. We think that the people that are likely to actually leave this ability is not people who would seem this as their way of fulfilling their lives. Because notice that this is not something that I was born with. This is not an ability that I grew to learn. This is not an ability that I can control. It is not a part of the identity of the people we are talking about, since they've just experienced this thing happening to them. So we don't think that they have this huge attachment to this new mutation or disease that they have now acquired. We think that the people that are going to object are people that are either scared of the government or of the procedure, in which we can assure that this is a harmless procedure and we can inform them, and we are the government, meaning that we can ensure that this would be done in a non-problematic way. But then the second group of people that we have is people that do want to cause harm. It is people that do want to have the ability to utilize this information against others. And here we say that there is an element of premeditation if you yourself choose not to undergo this. We say that these are people that are likely to take advantage of this. These are people that like to manipulate others. These are people that want to use this in a harmful way, and therefore we have reasons to suspect them and would like to take this away from them. So we already think that here we are dealing with this problematic population, and we don't really owe them anything as a society. But who do we owe more? We owe the general population much more, because here Tin is not being really comparative in the debate, because he's missing out the fact that there is a difference in the quantity of people. Here we are defending society at a whole. We are defending thousands of people that have daily interactions with that person. It can be someone random who has no idea, did not give his consent to his mind being read, but is simply in the wrong place in the wrong time. And we want to protect all of them, all of those people. We more than that think that the government has more of an obligation to more people as a whole, rather than this individual who gets a kick out of maybe seeing perversively what others think and being someone who lurks to their thoughts. Moreover, we say that there is a difference in terms of the quality of the harm that is being done to people, because unlike what they're trying to sell us on their side, my thoughts is not something that is as transparent. People can vaguely guess what I'm feeling, although they might even be wrong about that, because I might seem really okay, but I'm actually going to be in depression. But what the kind of thoughts that we are talking about are at a much larger scope. We keep on, out of time, we keep on thinking things that can be really stupid, that can be not what we're even what we really want to do in life. But moreover, the code to my safe is not something that anyone can know, because this is something that is extremely private, and there is no way, even if I'm a psychologist, to tell. So what we are saying here, that government should look at those people much more than looking at that person who has a trait that is not his own, is not attached to it, doesn't necessarily lead to his happiness. And here notice that we don't get engagement from Noam saying that we cannot respect even the choices that that person makes, because that person is constantly bombarded with others. There is no separation between self and between others for that person, meaning that we cannot even trust their own choice, since it is so influenced by everyone else around them. So for all of those reasons, we call you to propose.
Thank you for your fine speech. In order to complete and conclude this demo round, I invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Please proceed.
Just a second, can you hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Just let me turn my stopwatch. So obviously there is some balance of rights here that we have to balance out, right? They have their right to privacy that is violated to some extent, and which we admit to some extent, but we are just saying that our right to bodily autonomy and to decide for yourself what talents and what things are you keeping for yourself is a greater moral principle that we should be striving for. But first, couple of assumptions that Monica makes that I want to address head on before I go into other specific things. Like Monica asserts that these people are like perverted, like if they want to keep this up, they're just like perverted idiots that want to, how they say, peep into people's minds. But there are some legitimate reasons why you would want to keep this ability. Like, for example, you want to fight crime. You want to be a psychologist. You want to be more intuitive about these things. You don't believe, like, you don't need to have a reason for it. Like you can just not want an operation on yourself from the government that you might not trust. And sure, you might not trust it, and that's completely fine in this sort of situation. So I think that in this sort of situation, there are legitimate uses of this ability. Obviously, there are also illegitimate uses, but there's also illegitimate use of doing anything, like illegitimate use of studying psychology, learn to manipulate people better. Some people do it. We don't ban people from studying psychology because of it, because there is, like, we just mitigate it by punishing people who exploit this. But like, notice that everything that they're trying to say is like this harm upon this how do you say, privacy thing is coming from you reading my mind in public. But notice that, like, me in public setting, my thoughts in public setting is quite different than my private thoughts in my bedroom in this situation. Random thoughts in public are random in majority of situations. I'm walking down the streets, I'm thinking of like, what does this dog do in this situation? So majority of things and majority of deepest secrets is not something that you're expressing in a setting where these people can actually get to you. Even if they are, to some extent, if you're aware of these people existing, it's fine for me to think that you should be, like, I don't know, thinking less about these things in public, and you can have other spaces rather than injecting people forcibly with something that they don't want in this situation. Notice that harms are also mitigated on their side of the house. Notice, like, we have this magical number of 5,000 of these people being cool, which I didn't even thought about when I look at this motion, but it's even better for us. Notice that Noam concedes that most of the people will do this voluntarily, which we completely support. If most of the people would do this voluntarily, then only 1,000 people are left, which means that all of the things that Tim talks to you about, you can leave the room, kick them out, not hang out with them. It's much easier for you to do under our side of a house. But also, the harms that they say are much dispersed. And like I'm not sure what a lot of people are going to do with random thoughts on people on the streets, but concentrated benefits in them working in some law enforcement agencies, working as psychologists, can be a benefit to society on the other side in this situation. Notice that, how do you say, like they're trying to do this analogy of peeping in the shower, like we punish you in this situation. But if you randomly, like accidentally stumble upon somebody in the shower, we don't punish you in this situation. We realize that this is something that you're not intentional of doing. But most of the people that are not intentional of doing this in this situation would not like even pay attention to this. Like you zone out, like you do, like even if you are overwhelmed with your thoughts and overwhelmed with other people's thoughts as well, your brain learns to zone out of it. You cannot necessarily control it for sure. That's what the motion says, but you can learn to forget about it. This is what brain does with this sort of information. The majority of people, this is how they will deal with this in this situation. But also notice that what they're trying to say requires us to know who these people are. But we presumably know who these people are, because like if we want to inject people, we presumably need to have a list of who people to knock on their door to get them to government facility and inject them with this in this sort of situation. So this necessarily means that if you have the information of this, and if you can presumably, how do you say, send them this, we also can have less things done to them, like publish their names if you want. You don't even have to do this. Like this is something that will be spread very fast and very rapidly on the internet. Majority of the people that are psychopaths that you're saying would broadcast this. I am the mind reader. I know how to do this, all of these things. So if you want people to avoid them, they are going to avoid them. People who do not consent to be in their presence are not going to be in their presence. But some people might find a kick out of it. Some people might want to go to therapy to somebody who can actually see their thoughts, see through them, and actually help them because of this. Some people might have practical benefits where they're going to go to in the last part of my speech. But principle before this, we didn't choose to be born. I guess this is cliche. I've told this several thousand times. But like the existence is extremely painful. Your existence and the betterness of your existence is influenced by your abilities, talents, genes that you have in a certain situation. We say that you have complete ownership of thing that is your flesh and blood, including your talents in a certain situation. So if I don't want to give out anything, something in how do you say that is mine, I would not, how do you say, expect the government to come in and, how do you say, inject me. Let alone to go into depth like of nuclear leakage, was this your fault in this situation? Nothing of this was your fault. You suffered because of this. You're suffering because of the lack or how do you say, benefits that you have as your talents. We say that nobody has the right to take it away from you unless you want them to take it away from you. This is why be consistent, to be consistent, we support them taking away from themselves and like injecting themselves with this sort of situation, but not government forcibly doing this. Monica. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Even if you publish this humiliating list of mind readers, notice that this ability is uncontrollable and indiscriminate. You might have someone who wants to do good, but he does a lot of breaches for everyone around him.
Oh, sure, but like they can control themselves, right? Like if you don't want to read a lot of minds, you would how do you say, change your pattern of behavior in the association, but that's your choice, right? You know that you will have to live live with this curse in the association. If it pains you, that's your choice to not go to the government, get this injection and get it over with in the association. But notice that a lot of things, your principle is based on harm committed by these people towards a larger society. But a lot of things that are talents is bringing harm, right? As Tin said, high IQ makes it easier for me to manipulate other people in association, makes it even like that might arguably have a higher harm and higher damage for malicious people than reading of minds in association, because I know what to do with this in association. But what we are doing is we are how do you say, alleviating the consequence of this rather than punishing people for just what they are in association, but practical benefits to get to them. Notice that I can never exonerate myself if somebody thinks that I am doing something bad, if I am a minority, if I committed some crime that people perceive that I did in association, I can never completely exonerate myself. The best thing that I currently have, which is pretty faulty, is like lie detector machine, which sucks in association. We say that these people can be utilized as a glorified lie detector machine, right? If you want people to invite them and like to interrogate you and to confirm to the other world, to policemen and to people who are abusing you that you are not indeed committed this crime, this is something that alleviates a lot of suspicion from people who have been dealing with suspicion their whole life, which creates a larger benefit to the criminal justice system as a whole, and also creates more accountability, which is what Tin already talks about. Because we've won on a principal point already, but like we have also practical implications which are not malicious like opening government is assuming. We say we take this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all of your speeches. I hope you and everybody who is watching it and who will watch it have enjoyed it. I really want to thank all of you for letting these events to actually take place. I won't ask you to shake hands by the old debated tradition because of the circumstances, but yeah, only virtually. So stay home, stay safe, and be healthy. Thank you.